Okay, in this lesson we're going to solve absolute value equations, and I just want to real quickly review absolute value. If I have the absolute value of 3, for example, that equals 3, and the absolute value of negative 3 is also 3. By definition, absolute value means the distance a number is on the number line from 0. Okay, so some people remember it as always being positive, but it's truly the actual distance, and distance is always positive. A number is from 0 on the number line. So what happens when I have the absolute value of x plus 5 equals 3? Okay, I'm looking at this equation and I want to find the value of x that makes this equation true. So basically, if you look at my example I did here, this x plus 5 either needs to equal 3 or it needs to equal negative 3. So I can look at this x plus 5 equals 3, or my x plus 5 has to equal negative 3, because we know the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Okay, so key to remember with absolute value equations is that you're looking at what's inside here, and this needs to either be the positive value of this or it equals the negative value of that. So here, this is a basic linear equation to solve. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. And here I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. And you'll notice I don't just get positive, negative, the same number. I get two completely different solutions. But when I plug in the negative 2, I have negative 2 plus 5. And the absolute value of that is going to be 3, so that works. And when I plug in the negative 8, because I'm taking negative 8 plus 5, I get negative 3 absolute value, and that also equals 3. So both of my solutions are correct. So you'll notice that in this first example, I had the absolute value of something equals a number. In the second example, I have the absolute value of 3x minus 5. Then I have this minus 2 equals a number. So what's my first step? I'm going to make it look like that first example. So I'm going to have the absolute value of 3x minus 5 equals, by adding 2 to both sides, 9. So now that 3x minus 5 has to either equal 9 or it has to equal negative 9 to make that a true equation. So I just need to solve this. 3x equals 14, x equals 14 over 3. 3x equals negative 4 by adding 5 to both sides. X equals negative 4 thirds. Not very pretty solutions, but those are the solutions I end up with. And I can go back and check these by plugging them in. It's going to be a little messy because of the 14 over 3 and the negative 4 over 3. However, 3 times that will make it so you don't have to really worry about that. So let's look at our next example. I have the absolute value of 2x plus 4 equals negative 3. Right away you should say, whoa, there's something wrong with this one. Absolute value is always going to be a positive number. It's distance. It has to equal a positive number. So will the absolute value of 2x plus 4 ever equal negative 3? In this case, there's no solution. Okay? Sometimes it's not so obvious. You'll have a number, and when you bring the number over, then you get the negative. So just make sure in all of these problems you get the absolute value equals some number, and if that number happens to be negative, you don't have a solution. Now, in this last example, I have the absolute value of x minus 5 equals an expression with x. Okay, so these sometimes turn out a little crazy, but I'm going to use the same process. The x minus 5 either equals x minus 1, whatever that is, or the x minus 5 equals the opposite of x minus 1. Okay? So when I go through and try to solve this first equation, I'm going to try to get the x on one side and the constants on the other, but you'll notice my x's completely cancel out. I get 0 equals 4, and there's no solution on that part. But on this other one, I get x minus 5 equals negative x plus 1, and if I get my x's on one side and my constants on the other, I get 2x equals 6, so x equals 3. Let's just go back and check this one. I get the absolute value of 3 minus 5 has to equal 3 minus 1. The absolute value of negative 2 equals 2, which is a true statement. Okay, so in this case, I only came up with the one solution. I went through the exact same process, I just had an expression, so I needed to make sure that I took the positive expression and then the opposite of that. Don't forget to distribute your negative. So absolute value, the key is that you should, in a lot of cases, you do actually come up with two solutions. You set your absolute value, what's inside the absolute value, equal to a positive number, and then have it equal to the negative. And come up with your two solutions. Make sure you get the absolute value by itself first, and then you go through that process of setting what's inside equal to the positive, and then what's inside equal to the negative.